This is a production of South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Good evening and welcome to a special hour-long edition of South Dakota Focus. I'm Jackie Hendry. This is our ballot special ahead of the election on November 8th. We'll hear from some of the candidates for statewide office later this hour. But first, we'll examine the two statewide ballot questions voters will decide in a few weeks. Should the state expand Medicaid eligibility, and should it legalize recreational marijuana? The first ballot question we'll cover tonight is an amendment to the state's constitution that could expand Medicaid eligibility. Medicaid is a partnership between federal and state governments that uses public funds to cover health care costs for people who meet certain requirements. Right now, South Dakota Medicaid covers children, pregnant people, people with disabilities, people 65 and older, and people who make 46% or less than the federal poverty line. That's an annual income of less than $13,000 for a family of four. By expanding Medicaid, the state could include anyone between the ages of 18 and 65 who makes 138% or less than the federal poverty line. That's a little more than $38,000 a year for a family of four. We'll hear first from supporters of Medicaid expansion. They say it can close the coverage gap for people who earn too much for Medicaid now, but make too little to afford insurance any other way. Sarah Huska had to make a difficult decision last year. In December, her 5-year-old son was found unresponsive on his school playground from an apparent seizure. It took months to get a diagnosis.
And I was called out of work almost daily for 2 or 3 months, just getting him to appointments, picking him up from school because he was having too many episodes, medicines causing issues, and so we had to pick him up because they were scared of the behaviors happening. And it was just a lot, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was too much to be working full time.
Her previous job offered family leave, but Huska couldn't see a way to make it work long term. She left her full-time job for a part-time job that offered flexibility to care for her kids and start her own business. But leaving that full-time job meant losing her health insurance.
It's hard. I just don't get care right now. And thankfully nothing major has come up that's made me have to really think between what's going to happen.
Huska's son was diagnosed with psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, or pseudo-seizures. Both of her sons are eligible for Medicaid because they're under 18. She is not. Huska is one of thousands in South Dakota who could be covered if voters agree to expand Medicaid. Zach Marcus is a spokesperson for South Dakotans Decide Healthcare, a group that supports Amendment D to expand Medicaid.
Every year, $328 million of our taxes that could be staying here in our economy, providing healthcare for hardworking South Dakotans, is leaving our state to fund healthcare for 38 other states like California and New York that have already expanded Medicaid. What we're saying is we want to keep our tax dollars right here in South Dakota and make sure that hardworking people who maybe don't get health care provided through their jobs are able to access insurance and able to make sure that they can plan to see a doctor when they need to.
The option to expand Medicaid was introduced in the Affordable Care Act during the Obama administration. It's tended to be a partisan issue, but it's become increasingly popular as healthcare costs rise, including in South Dakota. This is a broad coalition of supporters for this constitutional amendment. Tell us who's on board with this.
Yeah, so I think it's a great example of why this is such a good thing for South Dakota, that we have so many different kinds of groups involved in our coalition, right? I mean, you probably just saw a couple of days ago, the State Chamber of Commerce announced that they are endorsing this effort as good for businesses in the state of South Dakota. All kinds of healthcare providers and healthcare advocacy organizations, from hospitals and community health centers to the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, AARP, the American Heart Association, to the Farmers Union, who represents farmers and ranchers around the state. Different kinds of organizations with different kinds of focuses, all saying this is a good thing for South Dakota.
The South Dakota Municipal League is another group that supports the amendment. It's an association of municipal leaders from across the state. Rapid City Mayor Steve Allender, a Republican, serves as its president.
And you know, South Dakota, I sometimes think, has a desire to be 50th in everything. And it just doesn't have to be that way. So now there's many states, and many conservative states, who have adopted Medicaid expansion.
Allender says caring for the state's workers will improve productivity.
South Dakota is a state that is founded by and held together by tourism and agriculture, both of which the workers are low-earning workers. I think it's a little offensive that we would rely on an industry to put us on the map, create thousands of jobs, put food on tables, and then tell them that's tough if they don't make enough money to take their kid to the doctor.
Proponents also say expanding Medicaid will help struggling rural hospitals. We know that South Dakota has a low Medicaid reimbursement rate. By broadening eligibility, some people might think that makes the problem worse for hospitals and other care centers that are taking Medicaid patients and then operating at a deficit with that low Medicaid reimbursement rate. Is that a valid point? How do we see eligibility expansion commingling with that low Medicaid reimbursement?
Yeah, so great question. And again, I think it's important to remember that when someone is sick, they're going to go see a doctor, whether they have coverage or not, right? The question is, are we going to see any money come out of that in reimbursement to the hospital, or is it fully going to be uncompensated care?
It's interesting. I never realized what a privilege it is when, you so often ask your friends like, oh, this is going on. What do you do? What should I do? And it's, oh, just go see your doctor, ask your doctor. Oh, this prescription helps. And it's just, when I just think about going to the doctor, it's like, okay, so if I do that, what am I not going to do this month? Is it that I don't invest in the business, or I don't try to do this other thing with the kids, or how much can I cut down on the food budget to make it work to go to one doctor's appointment?
And Sarah Huska is more informed than most. She used to work for the state's Department of Social Services, helping people determine if they were eligible for Medicaid.
The other people who I've had conversations, almost daily in my last job with, who have chronic conditions and can't ignore their healthcare costs like I'm able to right now. And that's such a heartbreaking conversation to say, I know, that you're doing your best and you're doing everything you can in this moment, and it's not because you're lazy and you don't want to go get a job. It's because you can't.
There are other income-based options under the Affordable Care Act for people to get private insurance with subsidies, but Huska makes too much to qualify. Even with a part-time job and a growing small business, she can't afford the monthly premium. I
could have signed up for, I would not have been able to afford it. And I know this was my choice. It felt out of necessity that I took this choice, though. And I mean, to do that would have been to choose that over rent. That's not an option.
Huska first shared her story with a video for the American Heart Association, which supports expansion. She has a message for other parents who find themselves in a similar position.
A lot of us don't qualify today, and it's even just working full-time at a minimum wage job, you don't qualify, and that's not enough to make ends meet. And there's no shame in advocating for what you need, and you're doing your best, and you deserve the right to health care.
Dozens of local organizations have come out in favor of expanding Medicaid eligibility through this constitutional amendment. Supporters include the state's top healthcare providers, as well as the State Chamber of Commerce. And as it turns out, the loudest voices against the measure belong to state lawmakers. But while some oppose expansion full stop, others fear the ramifications of changing the state constitution. The Republican-led State House has resisted Medicaid expansion since its introduction under the federal Affordable Care Act. That dates back to the Obama administration. Lawmakers shot down a bill to expand eligibility as recently as this year. State Senator John Wick was among the Republicans to oppose the bill.
But we have opportunities here in South Dakota because of what we've done, and we want the marketplace, not the federal government, to be in charge of your health care. Please vote no. Thank you.
The bill did fail in the Senate, but with the matter now up to voters, Senator Wick is making a similar plea.
The three reasons I have on expanding Medicaid and not doing it would be, number one, there are going to be over 6,700 families that have private health plans through Obamacare on the silver plans. They will lose them immediately.
A quick explanation. The Silver Plan under the Affordable Care Act allows people who make up to 400% of the federal poverty line to get private insurance plans with discounts. By expanding Medicaid, people who make even less can be eligible for Medicaid instead. If those newly eligible people want to stay on the Silver Plan, if Medicaid is expanded, then they'll have to pay full price.
If you're on Obamacare and you use this exchange, the silver plans that are available for people, and I'm not sitting here bragging up Obamacare, believe me, I'm still a Republican, card-carrying good guy. If you're using that plan, you get a taste of what private insurance is. And there are some limitations down the road through everything, but you get a taste of more freedom, more possibilities. And when you go back on Medicaid, that's it. You hit 139% of poverty, you're sitting where you are at 99% now. You don't dare make another dollar or you lose your health care.
No cost health care, that is. But that's not Senator Wick's only concern.
As far as most of our surrounding states, we have the lowest wait times of any state in the upper Midwest. And the quality of care for the people who need Medicaid most will suffer if we expand it. I mean, it's just math. There's so many doctors and so much time and so many providers that accept Medicaid. And the third one is rural hospitals suffer the most. If you look at some of the states that expanded early, you're finding rural hospitals closing more in those states than in non-expansion states. And that's one of the other reasons I want to stick with this. The system that we have is not perfect, but it is far better than more Medicaid setting prices, especially in rural hospitals, where if we can get private insurance, they negotiate their fees, they work with hospitals, and typically it's better off than somebody, with the literal, financial gun to your head saying this is what you can and can't charge.
We know the proponents of expanding Medicaid eligibility are pointing to rural hospitals that are at risk of closing, saying this helps them. You're saying they're more at risk with expansion. Can you help connect the dots for us a little bit?
Right now I'm working with a couple of people in Montana and North Dakota. Montana expanded, and their rural hospitals are not seeing a rosy financial picture. It didn't solve all the problems they thought it would solve.
Senator Wick is opposed to expanding Medicaid, period. That's true for most Republicans in the State House. But another lawmaker, Republican Senator Wayne Steinhauer, worries about making Medicaid expansion part of the state's constitution. In fact, it was his bill to expand Medicaid that the state Senate blocked this year. So you decided to bring a bill to expand Medicaid eligibility through the legislature.
Right.
Talk us through your thought process on that.
Well, my fear is that it's going to happen through constitutional amendment. And the Constitution is very inflexible in terms of our ability to change it. So once it's in the Constitution, should we want to tweak it or change it in the future, it'll be difficult for the legislature to do. And there is a phrase in that constitutional amendment that on the surface sounds just fine. It basically says, and I'm paraphrasing now, that you can't treat one individually different than another or a group of individuals different than another. But I'm here to tell you that I think morally we have a much higher obligation to take care of kids, elderly poor, and disabled individuals than we do those in between. So what Medicaid expansion is doing is taking care of those between 18 and 65. So those in favor of the expansion would probably tell you this is to prevent us from taking certain services away, mental health services, for example, from a certain group of individuals. That wouldn't be in my intention in the bill that I offered that was not successful. But here's the other thing it does, and I think this is probably more at the crux of the matter, is it prevents the state from having work requirements or co-pays. And so again, if the state ever found itself in a tough financial bind, you can change behaviors with co-pays. And so if you, is it fair to say maybe a person that smokes should have a contributing cost, or he should contribute to the cost of his health care a little bit more than a person that doesn't? Or is it unfair to say, gee, if you really are that able-bodied individual, and again, I'm a little cautious in saying that, is it unfair to say you should be going to school or you should be working at least 3 months out of the last 12 months? Those are work requirements that other states have put in place. But if this goes into our Constitution, we don't have that flexibility. And why would we need that? Maybe to change the cost curve for the state of South Dakota in the future.
The cost of expansion to the state is perhaps the most common reason lawmakers oppose expanding Medicaid. But exactly how much it will cost varies widely depending on who you ask. The Legislative Research Council is a nonpartisan group that analyzes policy and helps state lawmakers. It estimates Medicaid expansion will cost the state roughly $750,000 a year over the first 5 years. That includes some of the financial incentives included in the federal American Rescue Plan Act for states that haven't yet expanded Medicaid. After the first 5 years, the Research Council expects expanded Medicaid to cost the state about $22 million a year. But during a debate last month, Governor Kristi Noem used a much bigger number.
And looking 3-4 years down the road, we're anticipating that the annual cost for that Medicaid expansion ballot measure would be $80 million.
These costs also depend on the number of new enrollees under expanded Medicaid. That number could be as high as 67,000 people or as low as 22,000. Senator Steinhauer's opinion has evolved over the years. He believes expanding Medicaid is a moral imperative. He says the state should take advantage of current federal incentives while maintaining some legislative control. That's why he's wary of a constitutional amendment. But Senator Wick thinks there are other solutions to health care access.
The South Dakota legislature and the administration are working with creative ways to try and get health care to the people who need it. And you combine that with federal resources that are already available. There are 3 really good, solid reasons to vote no. And if you sit down with me one-on-one for an hour, I can give you a million reasons to vote no.
The second statewide ballot issue this year calls for the legalization of recreational marijuana. Again, Initiated Measure 27 legalizes possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana for adults aged 21 and older. If voters pass the measure, South Dakota would join 19 other states that have legalized the drug. But some South Dakotans point to those other states as proof that marijuana legalization can present dire consequences. Jim Kenyon is chair of Protecting South Dakota Kids, the organization opposing the measure to legalize recreational marijuana. His day job is directing Catholic social services in Rapid City. He's the first to say he doesn't typically get involved in politics.
I work with little folks, I work with families under bridges, I work with kids at the Rapid City Regional, I work with kids at the JDC, I work with couples struggling, individuals trying to seek recovery and wellness. We have homeless people that come in and out of our door here every day.
Kenyon remembers working with a young teenager who was violently ill after ingesting a full pack of marijuana gummies from Colorado.
And he was on a complete overdose, and I remember not sleeping the next day.
Kenyon says South Dakota voters didn't fully understand what they were voting for when they passed an amendment to legalize recreational marijuana in 2020. He points to defeated legalization measures in 2006 and 2010.
And this industry spent $1.6 million putting a lot of lipstick on this pig. But my challenge is to reach the 500,000 voters across this state that got confused. And I need donors. And I need moms and dads. And I need police officers willing to publicly testify. And I need my mayors across our state to make very, very clear that this won't be good for your hometown.
Part of Kenyon's wish came true during the annual public safety update in Sioux Falls. Mayor Paul Tenhaken broached the subject in his opening remarks.
And I'll tell you one thing, kind of as an aside, if we think that legalizing marijuana in the fall is going to lead to a safer community, we have another thing coming.
Longtime Minnehaha County Sheriff Mike Milstead agrees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I go to my remarks, I must say that for you to take a position of leadership on the recreational marijuana issue is bold, and I think it was something that the public needs to hear.
Sheriff Milstead has spent nearly 50 years in law enforcement in the Sioux Falls area. He also chairs the National Sheriff's Drug Enforcement Committee.
So I interact with a lot of sheriffs. This is not uncharted territory, legalization of marijuana, because it's occurred in some states. I talk to those sheriffs and find out what they're experiencing, talk to their mayors, find out what they're dealing with, and I don't hear any good. There's broken promises.
Milstead says one of those broken promises is a claim that legalizing marijuana eliminates the black market.
That's a flat lie. California estimate, I talked to a sheriff out in California, in his county, they estimate 80% of the marijuana that they encounter is black market marijuana. It's not the legal marijuana. Because you generate a tremendous number of new users of marijuana that today may not be using marijuana because they obey the law. Once it becomes legal, the number of users of marijuana skyrockets, and so the demand for marijuana goes up, and the black market flourishes. The drug cartels come in.
Some states that have legalized marijuana allow counties and municipalities to set their own limits on licenses and sales. Sioux Falls Mayor Paul Tenhaken sees that as a sign that full legalization isn't desirable everywhere.
In fact, I was just in Billings, Montana last month, and they have repealed recreational within city limits of Billings. While it's legal statewide, they have reversed that decision in their municipality because they've seen the consequences of it. Colorado Springs never allowed recreational within city limits because they knew the challenges that this would bring.
In those examples, sale of adult-use marijuana is prohibited, while possession remains legal. But maintaining local control is important to Mayor Tenhaken.
Well, one of my concerns, and we use the example of video lottery a lot, is that we have cannabis dispensaries all over, like we do with video lottery. And now, while I'm not necessarily opposed to the video lottery industry, I wish we had regulated that more. We have become known as a casino town. When people come to Sioux Falls, like, what's with all these casinos? And we have to explain video lottery and that we don't have a limit on these. That would be one of my concerns with cannabis.
Plenty of other concerns come to mind for Sheriff Milstead.
Look at what the National Safety Council says about workplace accidents with people that are positive for marijuana. It's roughly a 55% increase in workplace accidents. Look at the statistics on absenteeism in the workplace for people who are using recreational marijuana, like over 70% change in absenteeism. Look at the highway fatalities that we're seeing in states where they've legalized marijuana, where a high percentage of individuals now that were never before high on marijuana are involved in fatal motor vehicle accidents.
There can also be a financial cost to communities. Jim Kenyon of Protecting South Dakota Kids says that comes in the form of criminal justice and social service costs.
Who's going to hold the tab ultimately when we are building new jails and when you're trying to pay for me to provide mental health services and substance abuse services, or when our kids all end up in foster care because their families are broken because of addiction? I'll tell you who's going to pay that bill. It's going to be the taxpayer of the state of South Dakota. The industry will get off.
Studies vary on the true cost to taxpayers in states with legal marijuana, but for now, Sioux Falls Mayor Paul Tenhaken tries to take a pragmatic approach.
They may feel this is right in Oregon and in Colorado and California, but I don't think this is right in South Dakota right now. Maybe in the future, but where we sit today, I spend a lot of my day dealing with mental health challenges, crime challenges, half of the kids in our school on free and reduced lunch dealing with poverty issues. I don't see how recreational marijuana is going to help those situations and help those challenges we're dealing with.
You could be forgiven for thinking South Dakotans already decided to legalize marijuana because they did. In 2020, 54% of voters supported a constitutional amendment that legalized both medical and recreational marijuana. A separate measure on medicinal marijuana also passed in the same election. But last year, the state Supreme Court struck down the amendment that legalized recreational marijuana. The court ruling says that ballot measure violated the way constitutional amendments must be written. So the question is back on the ballot this year. Supporters say it's time to uphold the original will of the voters and establish a new economic opportunity for the state. When Kittrick Jeffries' mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, he did some research, and he found cancer patients could use medicinal marijuana. Jeffries eventually worked in cannabis policy in Washington and Oregon, early legalization states. He hopes to bring those lessons home to South Dakota. The state's 2020 ballot measure allows patients to use medicinal marijuana with a doctor's prescription. Jeffries opened a medicinal dispensary in Rapid City earlier this year. He wants to keep the business local.
It doesn't do South Dakota any good for out-of-state cannabis businesses to come in and invest into South Dakota. Sure, they may create jobs and generate a little tax revenue, and that's what stimulates the local economy. But here at Puffy's, what we're trying to do is make sure that every single one of our investors is from South Dakota and lives here in South Dakota. And so we also buy local. We buy local products. We buy local glass and artwork just to help stimulate that local economy.
It's taken about 2 years for the state's medical marijuana program to roll out. Jeffries says that infrastructure can help the state prepare for full legalization.
All 19 states before us that have recreational cannabis have implemented their medical programs and transitioned that into their recreational programs. There's a lot of benefits that come from that, including already vetted process for the licensed application systems and showing where those establishments should go in their correct zonings and things like that.
Jeffries says starting with medical cannabis helps determine all important details, like packaging requirements that keep consumers and kids safe. Matthew Schweik is the campaign manager for the Yes on 27 campaign. He says the opportunity to implement these kinds of safety measures is one reason to legalize marijuana.
I do agree with my opponents on a few things, which is that we don't want edibles that look like commercially available candy. We don't want packaging of cannabis products that appeal to children. We want packaging that is secure, that kids can't get into. These are the safeguards that we can put in place by legalizing or regulating cannabis. Right now, we're just relying on the illicit market, which doesn't check IDs, doesn't ensure product safety, doesn't ensure packaging requirements.
But Schweik has plenty of other reasons to support legalization.
We can stop wasting law enforcement time and resources on cannabis arrests. Let's stop wasting police time, prosecutors' time, court time, dealing with these cannabis arrests. Let's let the law enforcement focus on real crime. The second reason is it's still too difficult to access the medical cannabis program. A lot of patients are finding difficulty finding a doctor who will issue a recommendation. So we want to make sure that any medical cannabis patient in South Dakota over 21 does not have to fear arrest for small amounts of cannabis. And we know the people of South Dakota believe in that idea. And the third is this is about restoring the will of the people. Voters approved Amendment A by 54% in 2020. That law was overturned in a legal ruling that I think was deeply flawed, and Measure 27 is an opportunity for the voters to restore what was taken from them.
Some of the claims that I've heard from opponents when it comes to possible downsides of legalizing recreational marijuana: workplace accidents going up, incidences of accidents for people driving under the influence going up in places that have legalized, youth use and addiction rates up in places that have legalized. How do you respond to some of those concerns?
Well, with youth use, I think the data is clear. It's on our side. Colorado and Washington were the first two states to legalize cannabis back in 2012. Their departments of health issue reports every couple of years. Colorado issued its most recent report this year. The state of Washington issued its most recent report last year. Both states reported that teen use has decreased since 2012. With regard to traffic fatalities, again, I believe the data's on our side. We've got studies, reports on our website that go into detail on this, but when you look at the best reports, there really isn't any evidence that there's a correlation between legalization laws being passed and traffic fatalities. And with regard to workplace incidences, I think it's really important to recognize that Measure 27 does not change anything with regard to employer testing practices. So when I look at other states, I'm really not seeing negative consequences, and that's why the 19 other states that have legalized cannabis, none of them have repealed this policy.
Like Schweik, Kittrick Jeffries believes many of the concerns raised about cannabis have been overstated. Instead, he believes the industry can be an important new partner for economic development.
We plan on opening 11 more stores, including a cultivation facility and manufacturing facility. We plan to employ about 150 South Dakotans, so we're really excited about that. As well as offering philanthropic opportunities and going to different benefits with nonprofits and things like that.
Jeffries also hopes any sales tax can benefit communities that welcome the industry. Even if this year's measure passes, the details of tax structure and sales regulation are still up to state lawmakers. Along with launching his medical dispensary, Jeffries has spent the last 2 years lobbying for better cannabis policy in Pierre.
I believe that a successful cannabis industry in South Dakota looks like adding cannabis to one of our portfolios of agricultural products. I mean, we are top 5 in a wide variety of agricultural products. And right now, we have the federal government looming over inevitable federal legalization. How does South Dakota prep itself to be on the forefront of being an export state instead of an import state when it comes to this new product? And that's something that we have to work with our elected officials on and trying to figure out how we don't get left in the dust, if you will. But I look forward to working with them, and hopefully we can be an export state and not an import state.
You can find ongoing coverage on IM27 and Amendment D online at sdpb.org/news. Several statewide positions are also on the ballot this fall. The state constitution calls for an attorney general, secretary of state, state auditor, state treasurer, and a commissioner of school and public lands. A seat on the Public Utilities Commission is also on the ballot this year. That's the group that regulates electric, gas, and other utilities. We're highlighting 2 of those races on tonight's program. The first is the race for Secretary of State. The candidates are Republican Monet Johnson and Democrat Tom Kuhl. We'll hear first from Tom Kuhl. His platform includes maintaining absentee voting options and equal access to polls. Why don't you outline some of those key issues that you see?
Well, as you probably know, the Republicans ousted their incumbent, a moderate Republican by the name of Steve Barnett, in favor of what several have described as an election denier, and also possibly a Trumpist is the word I've heard used. She doesn't put much on her website, so it's a little hard to nail that down. But one of the concerns we have is that there is a national group of Republican candidates for secretaries of state that have formed, and among their goals is the elimination of absentee ballots, or at least voting by mail. They also want to do it with voting machines, and have paper ballots and one-day elections, as well as a number of other items. And again, we haven't been able to get a response from the Republican candidate for that position on whether she rejects these ideas, but I strongly reject these ideas. Another issue that came up just this month was there was a federal court ruling that the Secretary of State's office had been in violation of the National Voting Application Act in terms of dealing with, particularly with the reservations. It was a lawsuit filed by Rosebud and Oglala. And basically, they have not been taking an active role in registering voters at the license bureaus, the driver's license bureaus, and at social services offices, which is required by the National Act. And so the state is under direction to basically educate these 2 departments and take a more active role. And it is not just Native Americans that's of a concern, because under the national ruling, or the National Act, the departments are required, for instance, driver's license branches. It is supposed to be presumed that you're applying for voter registration when you get a driver's license, unless you decide to opt out. That's the national rule. And also when you change your address, if you change your address with the License Bureau, it's presumed that it is automatically changed. And so those are some of the things that the next Secretary of State will be working on to implement. And I promise to work very actively to implement those goals.
Say more about your views on absentee voting or voting by mail and why you support these things.
Well, I think the more people we get to vote, the better the election's going to be. And I think we need to, first of all, register everyone that wants to be registered, and sending out absentee ballots for those that are homebound or just are going to be out of town or whatever. is a perfectly good way to do it. There's been nothing shown in South Dakota that mail ballots are not secure. And I would like to expand the opportunity for people to get the absentee voting applications completed, possibly even going out to some of the places and signing them up. So we just need to work on that area. The other thing that has come up is whether the drop boxes where once you get those votes are secure, and I think they're perfectly secure. There are several counties that have limited the opportunity to get to those. I know, for instance, I brought mine down last election to the Minnehaha County Courthouse and had to go up the second story to find out where the box was. I think those should be open. I think we should explore the possibility that we could place them at post offices, or some suggested perhaps libraries, where we can be sure they're secure. But I think that's something to explore. But my goal is everybody that wants to vote, either party, any affiliation, should have the opportunity to do that as the easiest way possible.
Do you support online voting or online voters registration?
I would support online registration. I think we need to study whether online voting can be secure, and it is shown to be secure in other states, so I'd be willing to explore it. I'm not sure how the legislature would react, and of course their permission would be required to implement any needed changes. But again, anything we can do to make people aware of our candidates and to get them to select the candidate of their choice, we should be doing.
Kuhl's opponent is Republican Monet Johnson. Johnson was nominated during the South Dakota Republican Party convention, taking the place of incumbent Steve Barnett. Johnson's platform focuses on election integrity and security. What would you say are the top key issues for you in your campaign for Secretary of State?
One is I want to bring the post-election review. That's one thing that South Dakota, along with 4 other states, has not done. And I know this would bring the trust of the South Dakota voters, that they know that who they voted for is how it's tabulated. And I would like to work with the legislature and try to bring like a percentage of the precincts, like a random percentage, maybe 3%, that would be decided at the legislature. And that what it is they can hand count and use the tabulator. And then if they match up, we're good to go. If they're not, then we take more of the precinct. And then this just brings the trust of the citizens, you know, for their voting.
Interesting. So is that something that's not happening even at a county level or on more local levels currently?
Correct. It doesn't happen in South Dakota. It never has.
Interesting. So are there other ways that you hope to increase the level of trust in our election process?
Yes, I think voter encouraging education. Like I know here in Sioux Falls, during the primary, there were some people that received the wrong ballot, or they even voted. And so then once you have a vote, you're done. So if you have a person who knows, can print out their sample ballot, actually on the Secretary of State's website. It's sdsos.gov, and it's the voter information portal. And that way you can see where your polling place is, because that's changed with the redistricting. So that gives the voter more information that you go in there ready to cast your ballot. And that way you can also see what your ballot is. And those, if they would have done that and they received that ballot, they would have known it was the wrong one. So all you need to do is just go up to the election worker, ask for a different ballot, and then you'd know you have the correct one. So voter education is key also.
Yeah. Your opponent, in our conversation with him, he called you an election denier, and I want to give you a chance to respond to that. Do you believe that the 2020 presidential election was a free and fair election?
Well, one thing is President Trump did win South Dakota, but Joe Biden did win the key state, so he is our president. For me, I wasn't in the office at the time, so I want to move forward. I want to have people moving forward to the primary and to the general, and making sure that what their votes count, who they vote for is what's tabulated. So I'm just pushing forward for that.
I'm also curious about your opinion on online voter registration and some of those options. What would you like to say about that?
Yes, my stand was I'm against online voting and against voter fraud. I believe that paper ballots, which is wonderful that South Dakota has paper ballots, and we also have voter ID. So that part is good and secure.
I watched a video on your Facebook page a few weeks ago. Something you said was you want it to be easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Yes.
What does that look like for you?
What does that look like is I want to make every opportunity available to voters in South Dakota, and doing complete auditor training and poll watchers so that we can bring that back into the office. That way they know what they're doing is the legal way and following the state law. So I know we need to do more training for the auditors because they are hard-working people. They work for you in the county. You've elected them, the county, and they're working for you. So I want to give them the resources that they need.
Can you say a bit more about the role of poll watchers and how that informs your vision?
Yes, a lot of them, some are paid and some are volunteers, and a lot of people can have a Republican or a Democrat, because this is a bipartisan issue. We need to have them at the elections, and then they can help the voters when they come in. So if someone is out there and wants to volunteer, just reach out to your county auditor, because I'd rather have more people that want to volunteer than not enough. Yeah, this is your election. It's we the people.
I know access to voting for Native American voters is an important issue for you. Say more about that. Why is that so key to you?
Well, for those that don't know, I have 3 adopted Native American children. I have 2 that are enrolled, Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. They are 19 years old, and they got to register to vote right after their 18th birthday. They voted in the primary. They didn't get to vote for me during the convention because it was the GOP convention where I was nominated for Secretary of State. But they're excited to vote for me in this general election, vote for their mom. And then I have another daughter who is enrolled Oglala Lakota. So what I want to do is help them. I know there's issues where the polling place is a long ways away, so we need to work with them to make sure that it's easy for them to vote.
Have you had some conversations with maybe tribal governments or other organizations on those lands to get at some of those issues yet?
I have not, only because I'm not an elected official yet. So I'm just a concerned citizen that has Native American children, but I am ready and willing to work with them.
I wonder if you can say a bit more about bringing lawmakers on board to conduct these post-election reviews and these post-election audits.
Right.
Do you have a sense of widespread support in the state legislature for something like that?
I actually do. Election integrity is very important for a lot of people, and I know with this legislative session coming up, we want to work on one residency, because sometimes the mail forwarding businesses, you're only here 24 hours. And then you can get your, you can vote, you can get your tags, and you can even get a pistol permit. So I know that we need to work a little bit with that on residency requirements. For 30 days for people to get their pistol permit regularly, things like that. So I think we need to hone in and do a little bit more with residency.
You can see my full conversations with Monet Johnson and Tom Kuhl online at sdpb.org/election. The second race we'll highlight tonight is the race for a seat on the Public Utilities Commission. The candidates are Democrat Jim Barth and Republican Chris Nelson. We'll start with Jim Barth, former Minnehaha County Commissioner, whose primary concern is the potential use of eminent domain to gain land for a proposed CO2 pipeline. When you're talking to maybe younger or first-time voters or folks that aren't as plugged into the civic process, how do you explain the role of the Public Utilities Commission to those folks?
Well, that's an interesting question. They regulate utilities and protect the consumer, or they're supposed to. I think they could do a better job. So when there comes a project like a wind turbine or a gas line, it goes to them to be approved. And at the same time, if you have a complaint with your telephone company or your gas company, they are the escalation point for your complaint. Meanwhile, they regulate grain elevators and stuff like that as well, protecting hopefully grain producers, etc. So and they get well paid. They're in Pierre. There are 3 of them. One of them is up every 2 years. They have a 6-year term. They're pretty well compensated, and I'm hoping to become one of them.
Yeah. So for those folks who are plugged into the news cycle, they may be well aware that a big piece of this campaign so far has been issues related to eminent domain and a CO2 pipeline. Can you, for those of us not engaged in that, bring us up to speed?
Well, as a county commissioner, I remember when Dan Lederman came and first pitched the idea of the CO2 pipelines to the Minnehaha County Commission. There are actually 2 pipelines proposed across Minnehaha County. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And as I looked into it more and more, I became concerned about the dangers of it and also the damage that it will do to our land. The fact that Dan Lederman is an employee of Summit Carbon Solutions and a registered agent of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia also took me back a half step. But I've seen videos of these pipelines exploding, and I am aware of an accident in Cameroon where a lake full of CO2 turned upside down and 1.5 million tons of CO2 was released, killing 1,748 people and a few thousand animals. It's a dangerous gas. It's not explosive, but they use it to kill the pigs at Smithfield. They use it to euthanize turkeys that are infected with avian flu. And so there's that concern, because potentially a break in the line, a cloud of heavier than air gas could move some miles and suffocate people. Your automobile won't work in it because there's no oxygen. So up in Leola, up in McPherson County, a resident there has a plume model for a pumping station northwest of them that the cloud could go over Leola for hours. And during that time, no ambulance, no fire, no police. You'd be potentially a huge loss of life.
Yeah.
That concerns them, concerns me.
Yeah. And explain again how that eminent domain also bleeds into this.
Okay. Well, you know, my opponent, Chris Nelson, says that he has nothing to do with eminent domain, that it doesn't appear in the statute governing the Public Utilities Commission. But that pipeline, once approved by the Public Utilities Commission, can take you to court and seize your property to use as they wish. So without his permission, they don't have it. With his permission, they can go to court and take your land. And so I think he's not quite telling the truth when he says he has nothing to do with it.
What are some of the other key issues you see for?
Well, I take a look at, like I mentioned, grain elevators, the bonding on that. An elevator might go bankrupt owing local farmers millions of dollars, and the bond is like $5,000. That's not going to pay anybody back. And so that needs some reform. And I think that Chris has been there 11 years. He's had an opportunity to put in some of these reforms, but he's not shown any leadership on it. He could reform the eminent domain laws. He was asked that, why haven't you done anything? And he said, eminent domain never affected his land. Well, I don't find that to be a very astute answer by someone that's supposed to be a leader.
And is that something that, as Public Utilities Commissioner, you would bring to the legislature to do?
Absolutely. I think that there has been a lack of that type of activity over the last few years. I worked in a regulated monopoly, the telephone company, and my company had ways that they worked around the PUC to make profit, but the PUC might make a ruling that the phone company had to hook up that remote ranch no matter what the cost, and they would do it. But in the meantime, they made plenty of money doing it.
Barth is challenging Republican Chris Nelson, who's the current chair of the Public Utilities Commission. Nelson formerly served as Secretary of State in South Dakota and has spent the last 12 years on the Public Utilities Commission. He's proud of the expansion of broadband over that time and wants to keep utility prices affordable. What are some of the other key issues that you see for the PUC?
A couple of things. Obviously, when people think of the PUC, they think of electric and utility rates. And so that's always a focus of ours. And I think we've done a really good job of that as I look back over the last 6 years on the PUC. for those electricity companies that we regulate, we've held the rate increases to less than half the rate of inflation during that time. And so we've done a good job of keeping a lid on those prices. But in this inflationary time, that's going to get more challenging. And I appreciate that challenge. I want to use the experience I've got to work on behalf of the consumers in this state to keep a lid on those prices. The other area that's becoming increasingly important is simply the reliability of our electricity system. You know, we think back to Winter Storm Uri a year and a half ago, and we lost complete power in Texas, and for the first time we had rolling blackouts in South Dakota in parts of our state. And we've had other warnings that, you know, the electricity grid is going through a real growing phase, a changing phase in where we get our generation, and so that's having some challenges with reliability, and I want to focus on that because I don't ever want us to have rolling blackouts again in this state. I think people deserve better than that.
An issue that has been brought forth by your opponent, Jeff Barth, is it relates to a CO2 pipeline and issues related to eminent domain. What are you able to share about that process?
Sure. So under state law, the PUC is the permitting authority for certain large projects. Think your large wind farms, large electric transmission lines, oil pipelines, and carbon dioxide pipelines. And so before a company can build any of those type of projects, they need a permit from the PUC. And state law lays out the criteria for whether or not a company can get or not get a permit. The job of the PUC is to evaluate the facts, the evidence, the testimony that is presented by the company and, in many cases, by opponents to those projects. Evaluating that evidence and determining whether or not, under the criteria in state law, that project is entitled to a permit or not. That's not an easy process, especially when you get something contentious like a carbon dioxide pipeline, where you've got two very divergent views. And so, you know, in the case of a carbon dioxide pipeline, we're talking a process that will be a year or longer. We will go through a lot of discovery, a lot of evidence and testimony will come in. We'll have a formal hearing, which is a very court-like, trial-like process where all the sides will be able to present their cases, cross-examine witnesses of the other sides to get to the truth of the matter, and then the commissioners then will take that evidence and make a decision based on the criteria in state law. And so that's really the role that we play as an unbiased judicial system where we evaluate the case from an unbiased perspective as required by law and then make our decision based on the law. Now, you also mentioned eminent domain, and that's obviously something that's being talked about frequently as it relates to this project and other similar projects. And I think it's important to understand that the PUC does not have a role, does not have jurisdiction under state law as it relates to eminent domain. And so what do I mean by that? State law lays out the parameters for eminent domain. It says who can exercise it, under what conditions it can be exercised. And then if there are disputes between somebody that wants to exercise it and a landowner, then law says those disputes are arbitrated in the circuit court and Supreme Court system. And right now, as it relates to at least one of the carbon pipelines, there's over 20 lawsuits that have already been filed relating to eminent domain, and those are being worked out in the court system, not in front of the PUC because we simply don't have jurisdiction. I think one of the areas where maybe people get a little confused on that is if you go to the state of Iowa, our counterparts at the Iowa Utilities Board, they do have some jurisdiction to determine who can and can't use eminent domain. And so if folks follow the news down there, they may see, well, commissioners down there are making those kind of decisions. The reason is because they've got a different set of state laws than what we do here.
Interesting. Yeah. So to that end, I want to give you a chance to respond to something that Mr. Barth said in our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aligning with what you just outlined. However, he used the words that he wasn't sure that you were being completely honest about your role as it relates to eminent domain, because even if that's not the PUC's decision directly, if the PUC approves something, then that opens up that chance for that conflict between a landowner and another entity. How would you like to respond to that?
Sure. So, well, I guess I would maybe expand upon what I've already said. You know, we've not issued any kind of permit yet, and yet there are already 20 lawsuits dealing with eminent domain between the companies and landowners. And so, you know, that conflict is already there, and already playing out in the court system and being arbitrated there, and the PUC hasn't even come close to making a decision, yes or no, on a permit. And so, as I said, that whole issue of eminent domain is laid out in state law as to who can and can't exercise it and under what parameters.
Again, you can see my full conversations with Chris Nelson and Jeff Barth online at sdpb.org/election. That's also where you can find the conversations we didn't have time for tonight with candidates for state auditor and state treasurer, and the rest of SDPB's election coverage. Join us again on Friday, November 4th, when SDPB partners with Dakota News Now for the U.S. Senate debate. Republican John Thune, Democrat Brian Bangs, and Libertarian Tamara Lessner join us here in the Leo P. Flynn Gallery at SDPB's Sioux Falls studio. That's at 8 p.m. Central, 7 Mountain. Until then, I'm Jackie Hendry. Thank you for watching.
One day, in one cave, music and spirits honor our ancestors. Dia de los Muertos with guests Flor de Toloache, Osomatli, and Los Lobos. Celebrate.
Friday at 8, 7 Mountain on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.